So today's presentation is really all about the clear and complete guide to account-based experience. But believe it or not, this is my 9th guide, and I really do think this is the best one yet. I write these guides because I love to teach. I love to share best practices, and this one is chock full of great advice. I hope some of you have had a chance to start taking a look at it, and today's presentation really is just going to be a summary of some of the highlights. Let's begin with the what is this whole idea of account-based experience? And to answer that, let's go back about 15 years to my time when I was the CMO and founder at Marketo. We built a demand generation engine which was really effective. It generated as much as 90% of all the pipeline that the sales team closed. And it really helped to grow the business all the way up to the IPO. But over time, we also learned that we needed other ways to grow the business. We started experimenting with outbound strategies, which ultimately became known as account-based marketing. The analogy here I like to use is that the traditional demand generation was like fishing with nets. We would run our campaigns, and we didn't care which accounts responded specifically, as long as we got enough overall responses. Whereas account-based marketing was much more like fishing with a spear, identifying the big fish, the big accounts, and going after them proactively. It was the effectiveness of this account-based approach that inspired me to found Engagio 6 years ago, as well as about a year ago to combine Engagio and Demandbase to create what I feel pretty confident is saying the most powerful, definitive account-based platform. However, over time, I've also come to realize that there's limitations to the traditional account-based approach. In ABM, we identify and go after those big valuable accounts, regardless of whether the time is right or if they're at all interested in hearing from us. That can be the exact kind of experience that buyers hate. To put simply, getting poked by a spear doesn't feel very good. And that's why we're introducing this new concept of account-based experience, which is really all about trying to align our go-to-market to what's going to be right and relevant to the account and to the buyer. In many ways, account-based experience combines the precision and targeting of traditional ABM with the better customer experience of inbound marketing, the more engageability, if you will. Another problem with traditional account-based marketing is right in the name. By definition, it only focuses on marketing. But what we've learned over the last 5 years or so is that account-based strategies really do need coordination across sales, marketing, the entire go-to-market function. And then the other thing that makes account-based experience so effective is the way that it aligns everything that we do to the account journey. So that way we can use intelligence and insights to know when to engage and what to say to each account across the account journey, across the B2B customer lifecycle. So knowing that this account journey is such a critical concept to ABX, let's do a dive in to understand how we can define and understand the account journey. And this is really where big data and AI can help us. And I like using this acronym FIRE to explain what's going on. The F in FIRE really stands for the fit. This is understanding which accounts look like our best accounts, which accounts are the ones we really want to go after because they're in our ideal customer profile and they're qualified for us. The I, that stands for intent. And this is really all about understanding what topics an account is researching out on the open web so we can start to understand what they're interested in, and we can start seeing patterns of when they're surging on topics which might indicate that they're entering into a buying cycle. The R, that stands for our relationship. And relationship is all about the context and history with the account. Do we have open opportunities there? Do we know people? Perhaps there's somebody there who used to work at one of our customers. Or perhaps just our SDRs have already been prospecting into the account. That's all part of the relationship score. And last but not least is the E, which stands for engagement. And this is really all about whether that account is interacting with us. Are they visiting our website? Are they downloading our content, attending our events? Now, what's cool about the FIRE acronym here is we can take all 4 of those ingredients and combine them together into a 5th score that we call Pipeline Predict. And this is really all about understanding the pattern of behaviors that accounts tend to go through as they lead up to becoming an opportunity, and then scoring all your accounts for when they show similar patterns of behaviors. An account with a high Pipeline Predict score is very likely to be entering into a buying cycle shortly. We can then take all of these scores and then use them to understand where an account is in its buying journey. So let's dive into this all in a little bit more detail. These are the stages that at Demandbase we sort of recommend our customers start with. But it's really important to understand that you can and should customize these stages to match your unique business, because they combine the machine learning with business rules so that you can kind of really optimize what's best for you. The way we do it here is at the top, the qualified stage. Well, that's using that fit score. And these are the accounts that match our ideal customer profile, just the ones that we want to go after, but who aren't otherwise further down the funnel. The next stage, which we call aware, these are the accounts that are aware of our category. They're showing some intent and interest in what we're doing, but they're still not really engaging with us. Now, that next stage is when they actually start to engage with our website, our programs. That's the engagement score. And then we get to the sort of magic stage of marketing qualified account, or MQA. This is the most important stage. In many ways, this is a play on the traditional MQL, or marketing qualified lead. And this is when we are identifying those accounts that are actually ready for us to reach out to them for sales outreach. As long as it's done in a relevant, trusted way, it can be really, really effective. And this is where that Pipeline Predict score comes in, or just accounts that are showing very high levels of engagement. Really combining those two is sort of the best way to identify those marketing qualified accounts. After the MQA stage, you might have a meeting stage, an SQL stage, an opportunity stage, a customer stage, and then don't forget about those all-important post-sale stages where we're tracking expansion, retention, things like that. So this really is sort of the core of ABX, where we're going to then understand where each account is in its journey, and then we're going to align how we go to market, how we interact with them with the right interactions for where they are in their journey. At the very top, those qualified accounts, they aren't interested in hearing from us yet. We just want to really be focusing on building our brand. Now, many of you probably are more on the demand generation side of the house, or the revenue marketing side of the house, and you may not tend to think about branding very much, but it's so essential. The companies with the best brands also have the most effective revenue marketing programs. And there's a really good section in the guide all about branding and the importance of emotions in building brands. So I encourage you to check it out. And that's how it should really be at the very top of the funnel. As an account moves down, as they start to actually engage with us a little bit, now is when we sort of earn the right to move from emotion to logic, and to start to actually kind of share thought leadership, education, and best practices. We're still not trying to get a meeting with them yet because they're not showing any signs of being ready for that. But when they do, and they hit that magic MQA stage, that's when we want to kind of reach out to them so we can engage them in a sales cycle before they come to our website and raise their hand, and ideally before they've engaged with a competitor. Once an account is in an opportunity, now we have to really be thinking about the broad buying committee. We need to understand that there's not just one decision maker. How can we support them in building their consensus and validating their decision, so that we can accelerate that sales cycle and improve our win rates? And then once they're a customer, as we've said, we want to continue to focus on the post-sale experience so that we can drive the account retention as well as expansion. And across all of these stages, it's about using data and insights so that we can be relevant at every stage, because that's so essential to everything we do in ABX. Okay, so we've now covered what ABX is, now we're going to spend the rest of the presentation really talking about how you can actually do ABX using the 5 core ABX processes. The first is building your account-based foundation. Then how do we find and identify the accounts that are really going to be valuable and drive our business? How do we then engage with them in a relevant way across channels? How do we really work in alignment with the sales team to drive the relationships and close the business? And then how do we measure the results and how the accounts are progressing through the life cycle? So we'll cover all that. We'll wrap briefly with a quick discussion about ABX technology and then how to get started with pilots. So let's dive right into it, beginning with building that all-critical account-based foundation. So I alluded to earlier that my time doing ABM at Marketo is what inspired me to start Engagio. Because we were really trying to pioneer this account-based stuff, but honestly, it was really hard because our systems weren't account-based. And the data we needed was really scattered across multiple silos. And so it was hard to identify the accounts. It was hard to orchestrate the interactions, hard to let sales know what was going on, and it was really hard to measure the results. I drove my marketing operations team crazy trying to torque Marketo and Salesforce to make all of this work. And that's what inspired Engagio. So fundamentally, this first step in ABX about building your account-based foundation is really all about connecting all the data you need into a single comprehensive view. It's about taking your first-party data. This is the data you know about the account in your systems. It's the information that's sitting in your CRM, in your marketing automation system. Even the data that sits in your email and calendar system is valuable information about that relationship that you have with the account. You want to combine the first-party data with the 5 key aspects of third-party data as well. Firmographics and hierarchies, that tells you who the accounts are, their industries, their size, their locations. Technographics, this is what other technologies the company uses. If you're a technology company, our data models, our machine learning, indicate that technographics are probably the most important factor in identifying which accounts are a good fit for you. Intent data, we've talked about that. This is which accounts are in market and showing interest in your solutions. You want to combine that. Account identification, this is essential to be able to de-anonymize activities and really match what's happening out on the open web and on your website anonymously to the right account. And last but not least, contact data, because you need to not just go after accounts, but the people at the accounts. Once you bring all this data together, you need to match it at the account level. I already mentioned de-anonymization. This is where there's a lot of discussion out there about match rates. And match rates really do matter, but so does accuracy, because a match rate that's not right doesn't do anybody any good. And then lead to account matching is really about matching the known leads in your first-party data to the right account. Once you have that, you have a single view of the account, which you can use as the foundation for everything you're doing, but you can't just sit on your laurels. You have to maintain it, keep the data clean, augment it, and make sure that it's accurate over time. Getting this account-based foundation right is one of the most critical success factors to successful ABX. Phew, okay. So once we have that account-based foundation, now we can really get into find, engage, close, those 3 steps of kind of going after the accounts. So when we start talking about find, probably one of the most important things to know is that the number of accounts that you could go after is always a lot more than the number of accounts that we can actually go after, given our resources at any point in time. And so there's 3 key strategies you should be thinking about. The first is about tiering your accounts and not trying to treat every target account the same. That's going to help your resources go a long way. Second is about really segmenting your accounts and then kind of rotating which group of accounts you focus more on at any point in time. And then third is having rules that trigger extra focus on specific accounts. So I'm going to talk about all of these. Let's really begin first with really understanding how you're going to tier your accounts. And that starts with understanding that there are different styles of ABX. At the top of the ABX pyramid is one-to-one. This is your truly bespoke style of ABX, where you're going to run 100% customized programs based upon deep account research. This is appropriate for your 7-figure deals, $3, $4, $5 million a year, per year. And as a result, you can't really have very many. The median number of one-to-one accounts a company has is a grand total of 14. And you're going to spend a lot on these accounts, as much as $50,000 a year per account. That's very effective, but it is hard to scale, which is why then we have the one-to-few approach. This, is maybe that's appropriate for your accounts that are a couple $100,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. As a result, you can have more of them. The median company has 50 of these. And this is really characterized by focusing on small sets of micro segments where you're going to be highly customized and targeted within that micro segment. The third level is one-to-many. This is for your low 6-figure deals, your $100,000 or so. Companies typically have hundreds of these, perhaps thousands, although when they do have thousands, they're probably using a rotation strategy. This is where a lot of companies do play with ABX. It's much more scalable. There's more technology involved, and it's obviously a lower level of investment and personalization per account. I do talk at the very bottom of the pyramid about just targeted demand gen. This is obviously scalable to the thousands. You're basically doing traditional marketing techniques, just targeting specific named accounts. So there's no one strategy that's best. Matter of fact, most companies use a mix of all the strategies. The key is to really, I think, before you even pick your accounts, to go and define what I call your entitlements. Because the entitlements are effectively saying, when I have an account and say that that's, say, a one-to-one account, here's what we're going to do. And here's what we're going to do kind of that's always on. And here's what we're going to do when we want to trigger even more focus. Like, for example, if it becomes an MQA. So what you're looking at here, these are the entitlements we use here at Demandbase. And so what's so great about defining your entitlements first is that this lets you really know how many accounts you can support for each tier. So for example, in that one-to-one, if you're going to have a detailed account plan, you can really probably only do that for a small handful of accounts. By getting these entitlements in place, you'll know how many accounts you can support, and then you can use that to make sure you're not picking too many at each tier. Probably one of the biggest mistakes I've seen companies make is they put too many accounts into their top tier, and as a result, they can't really give the right level of focus and attention that those accounts deserve. With entitlements in place, now you're ready to actually really start to pick how you're going to focus on the accounts. And again, what you're looking at here is this is how we do it at Demandbase. As you see at the bottom, first of all, we have some rotating extra focus on particular segments. Maybe a competitive displacement, maybe certain industries, where we'll put more energy in, to those accounts at different periods of time. We also have our set of triggers that sort of highlight, bubble an account up to get extra focus, like if they're an MQA or if they have a new executive come on board. Now, on top of that, what we do is we ask our sales team to then really pick and tier the accounts in their territory. And we let them say, you get 5 one-to-ones, you get 30 one-to-fews, and about 100 one-to-manys. We give them a spreadsheet of their territory where we have each of those factors, the F, the I, the R, the E, and we combine that to a consolidated score that they can then go in and pick the accounts that they want to sort of focus on. That way they feel a lot of ownership of the account selection process, which is really important for sales and marketing alignment. So that's how we find and tier the accounts that we're going to be going after. Which brings us now to engage. How are we going to engage these accounts across channels in a relevant and personalized way? So the guide really talks about the 5 key sub-processes under engagement. How are we going to understand the accounts so that we can be more relevant? How we then personalize our interactions? How we advertise to them, that's such an important part of ABX in itself. How do we interact with them across different channels? And then finally, how do we orchestrate all those interactions together? So let's dive talking about as many of these as we can. That personal understanding and personalization at the top is so essential in ABX. Because you got to remember, our buyers live in a noisy world where there's a lot of other accounts kind of trying to go after them. And we are not going to stand out against all that noise if we're not relevant, if we're not personalized. Fortunately, especially for those MQA accounts, if we can be relevant and personalized, we can actually be effective. ITSMA research says that 75% of accounts, of people, executives, will respond if you reach out to them with ideas that are relevant to their business, where relevance is based on a knowledge and understanding of their industry, of their unique business, and it brings them fresh ideas to advance the business forward. It's very much like the Challenger sale for anybody who's read that, but applied to marketing. So relevance is so essential. How do you get that relevance? Well, you need insights. Now, you can get insights by doing account research, reading their public filings, and so on. But there's actually also some interesting ways that you can just get relevance that are really pretty scalable and automated. We've talked a lot already about journey stage as an essential way to understand what's going to be relevant to that account based upon where they are. Intent data, can tell you what topics are they interested in. So when you talk about that, you can be reaching out to them based on the things they care about. Technographics can be exciting as a way to sort of be more relevant, or even just not talking specifically to their industry. These are all, there's all these different techniques or ways that are pretty scalable that you can therefore use to customize and make your interactions and outreach more relevant. So when it comes time to actually interacting with the accounts, there's a lot of channels that you have available to you. This data from Topo talks about some of the top ones. Your SDRs, super important. Your events, direct mail, digital advertising, all these channels really matter. And there's good sections in the guide kind of talking about each of them. I want to just spend a minute focusing on the unique challenges of account-based advertising. So traditional advertising solutions were built to support big B2C companies, like e-tailers, and so on. And most account-based solutions are trying to sort of lay on top of that kind of old B2C infrastructure, if you will. But there's really kind of two unique challenges that apply in the B2B world. The first is, how do you optimize your budget and balance your budget across target accounts? So, a ABM solution that is using a traditional consumer DSP, the number of impressions per account is going to be typically proportional to the number of cookies that are at each account, because they aren't really, these B2C DSPs aren't really count aware. The problem is when you have account lists where you have companies of very different sizes. Let's say you go after retail and you have one of your target accounts is Walmart and one of your target accounts is Land's End. Walmart has over 2 million employees. Land's End has about 5,000. And with a traditional ABM advertising solution, Walmart's going to suck up almost all of the impressions, leaving very little budget left for Land's End. You see this in the data below. With Demandbase, we've actually built a DSP that is account aware and can load balance your spending across accounts. And as a result, we're able to make sure that a much higher percentage of the impressions are spread out across accounts. Therefore, more accounts are going to get more impressions overall, resulting in more awareness for you. The second challenge with account-based advertising is trying to make sure that your ads are shown to the right people within the account. Typically, this is done by other advertising solutions by trying to target name and title or titles within an enterprise. That data is really bad because, again, these solutions were built for B2C, not B2B. At Demandbase, instead, we really try to focus your bidding on the specific people at those accounts who are showing the intent and engagement with you already. And so when we see those, we're going to bid a lot higher It's a much more effective way to make sure that your advertising dollars are not just going to the right account, but are going to the right people at that account. So all these channels really matter in account-based experience. But really, probably the most important thing is how do you orchestrate your interactions across all the channels so that they have a consistent experience. That's been shown to have a more effective outcome than using any one channel. And this is really where the concept of a play becomes so important. A play is how you start to automate and scale the coordinated interactions across channels. The three pieces of a play are, first of all, the segment, who are you going to be going after? The action sequence, what are the specific things you're going to do? And then the trigger, which is when are you going to kind of launch and run this play? There's a lot more about this in the guide, but there's just so many kinds of plays that you can run. That I think it's super cool. So for example, if you have a target account and you see a lower level person come and request a demo, in addition to responding to that, you can also maybe reach out to an executive with a high value offer. Or if you have, say, an open opportunity, you can run a play where you're going to sort of be advertising to the broader buying committee in order to drive that validation and consensus. Or maybe you have an account where an executive comes along and downloads an ebook. Maybe in addition to responding to that, you use that to trigger a much more personalized outreach, offering them a meeting with one of your executives. Okay, so once we've covered how to engage with these accounts, the next step in the process is where we're going to really start to close these accounts by working in close alignment with sales. And I really can't emphasize enough how important this is. Topo Research has said that the #1 indicator of account-based success is the coordination between marketing and sales. And it requires a different way of working than in the old days. The traditional marketing and sales process that we did at Marketo and we pioneered with demand generation looks kind of like a baton pass. Marketing generates the lead, it goes to the SDR to get qualified, which then goes to the salesperson to close, which then goes to the customer success team. And it's a very linear process, which frankly doesn't line up well to today's nonlinear buying journeys. And instead, what we need is something that looks much more like a soccer team, where the ball moves up and back and forth down the field. But we have players in different positions who are really working together in an orchestrated way to ultimately make that happen. It's a different model. It's a better model for how marketing and sales work and work together. And there's sort of 3 levels or 3 ways that we can think about trying to make that level of alignment happen. The first is just sharing data. This goes back to building that account-based foundation that we talked about at the very beginning. When you have that foundation and marketing and sales are both looking at it, it means you're all looking at the same data and are on the same page. That's sort of your bare minimum condition for alignment. The second level is where you can start alerting the sales team to key insights. Maybe they have an account in their territory where they have an open opportunity, but they haven't really talked to that account in the last 2 weeks. But all of a sudden you see them lighting up on your website, you're going to want to alert the sales rep about that kind of key insight. There's so many things you can alert them about. And then the third level is really where we start to orchestrate those interactions in a very coordinated way. So back to sort of that level 2 of the alerting. As I said, there's so many types of things that you can alert a salesperson about. And you can alert them over email, over Slack, or right inside of the CRM. So maybe they have an account that's a newly marketing qualified account. Or maybe they have an open opportunity that's suddenly showing intent for your competitors. Or a closed lost opportunity that suddenly wakes back up. Again, the number of things that you can alert your sales team about is limited only by the power of your account-based tool and your imagination. Now for that third level of orchestrated interactions, obviously if this and that rules can help scale things, but the most basic advice I have for you is just to implement something really simple that I call an ABX or an ABM stand-up. This is probably your #1 most important strategy. And it's based upon stand-ups from software development, Once every week or 2 weeks or month, if you must, get your marketer, your salesperson, and your SDR, if you have it, together. Try to keep it just to that 3 people, that small group, and have a 15-minute agenda where you're just going to talk about that rep's accounts, what's going on, and what are you going to do to engage those accounts. Getting those 3 people together, just talking about accounts, unlocks magic for really driving ABX success. Okay, the last of the 5 ABX processes is how do we really measure account progress? And in reality, in an ABX world, we need different metrics than we use in traditional demand generation. It's not about the number of leads or the number of responses. It's not about how many people attend your event. It's about the quality of the interactions. Is it the right people from the right companies? Or as David Ogilvy likes to say, don't count the people you reach the people that count. So there's really 3 kinds of analytics or metrics that we want to do in ABX. The first is really kind of engagement. Are we creating and deepening relationships with the right people at the right accounts? The second comes back to this key concept of journeys. How are the accounts moving through the journey over time towards the things that we care about, like becoming pipeline or revenue? And then the third is really about ROI. And frankly, you're spending money, is it working? What kind of return are you getting on that investment? So I'm going to double click on these first 2. There's more about the third one in the guide as well. But on engagement, there's lots of engagement metrics that you can use to measure relationship quality. Web traffic is a great, easy proxy. If you're able to have a group of target accounts and you know how much they're visiting the website, and then you start doing some ABX like advertising, and you're able to show that those accounts are visiting the website more, that's one way to measure success. And then you can go deeper and really look at engagement across channels. Are they downloading your content more? Are they attending your events more? And how is that breaking out by persona? If you're able to show deepening levels of engagement with the right personas, you're on the right track with ABX success. In terms of the journeys, we've talked about having those different stages. And then you can measure how accounts move through those stages using what we call the 4 V's. Value is where are they right now? How many accounts do I have in each stage? Volume is really about movement. How many accounts entered the MQA stage in last quarter? And is that number going up or down? I'm cheating with conversion as a 4V. And this is all about conversion rates. How many accounts that became MQA progressed to the meeting stage? And then velocity is about speed. How long are they spending in each stage? Because you want everything to move faster if you can. These, marketers are used to metrics like this for the leads. This is just taking the same thing and applying it to the account-based world. But it's so essential to give you the leading indicators that you need for success. Okay, so we're going to wrap things up here, as I said, with talking briefly about ABX technology and then a little bit about getting started with pilots. So in terms of ABX technology, as I hope you've seen from this whole presentation, ABX is a business strategy and not a technology category, although there are technologies that support it, including ABX or ABM platforms. And according to Topo, the companies that are the best and see the best results from account-based strategies do tend to spend more on technology. Put another way, you don't need technology necessarily to get started. You're going to want technology to really scale this and be successful over time. And there are a ton of relevant technologies that you might be thinking about across building your foundation, finding the accounts that matter, engaging them across channels, closing them, and then measuring the results. I don't want to overwhelm you kind of with all these categories. There's kind of 2 things that I kind of want to point out. The first is that there is this emerging concept of account-based platforms. There's Demandbase, there's 6Sense, there's Terminus, for example, that really bring together many of the core pieces from the prior slide. Topo Research has found that account-based platforms are actually the most impactful and the most satisfaction driving of all the ABX investments. You can get started with just things like lead to account matching or account-based advertising if you want to kind of get started without necessarily investing in the full ABX platform. So on that note, when it comes to ABX, I really do encourage you to think big, but then start small and move quickly. By think big, I mean, read the guide and really paint a vision for yourself and for your company about what the end state's going to look like when you're doing all of these best practices. But at the same time, don't overwhelm yourself and think you're going to do all these things kind of in the first week or even the first month. You can get started small, especially with a pilot. I would recommend, just some or all of these 5 things, in the pilot stage. Define those entitlements and pick some accounts. Try just advertising to accounts that are showing intent. Just do that lead to account matching so you start to build that data foundation. Just start alerting your sales team about a couple of key insights, like accounts that maybe are in market. Get going with some of those ABX stand-ups. Or if you want to be even just one step more sophisticated, is start experimenting with simple orchestrated plays like a direct mail where the SDRs follow up. If you even just implement a few of these 5 things, you're off to the races on a really pretty good account-based strategy. From there, you can move to an intermediate mode. Start, maybe having more than one style of ABX, involving your metrics, and then really refining things. And then you can go into the fast lane with really advanced plays, applying it to maybe all stages of the journey, including post-sale, starting to do multi-touch attribution, things like that. So there is a journey you can follow on here. Don't get overwhelmed. There's really ways to get started quickly. So with that is the clear and complete guide to ABX, which is a new fundamental strategy for rethinking the account-based experience with a customer CX or experience CX lens. The most important idea in ABX is aligning your interactions to give the right experience at each stage of the journey. Finding those accounts that matter is a really important step, and getting those entitlements defined is a really essential way to make sure that you don't pick too many accounts for each tier for what you can really handle. That MQA is such an essential stage in your whole journey. Use things like predictive analytics and engagement to identify the accounts that are in that magic moment when they're really ready to engage, and then reach out to them in an orchestrated way across channels that's going to be really, really relevant. Make sure you work with the sales team, get those ABX stand-ups in place, and then last but not least, evolve your metrics to be based on quality and not quantity.